12 sitting Republican senators have called for an independent investigation into Donald Trump. This isn't a routine political move. It comes after leaked financial documents suggest Trump may have quietly received tens of millions of dollars from foreign governments while in office. Not after, but during his presidency. That alone raises serious constitutional concerns. When foreign money flows to a sitting president through hidden channels, it's not just questionable, it can threaten national interests. What makes this even more striking is that these senators are not outsiders. They are longtime Trump allies. Reports indicate this money didn't go through normal campaign routes, but was funneled through layers of anonymous shell companies, making it nearly impossible to trace without insider knowledge. And here's the shocker. This push isn't coming from moderates or retiring voices. It's coming from Trump loyalists, lawmakers who defended him through 2 impeachments, the January 6th events, and every indictment he's faced. But this time, they reviewed the data, and what they saw looked less like politics and more like a structured system designed to disguise foreign cash. Some of these senators practically built their careers on standing by Trump, no matter the controversy. Loyalty was not just a position, it was their political brand. But according to reports, when confronted with documents suggesting systematic hidden payments, 12 of them said enough. One of them, Senator Tom Tillis, reportedly told colleagues that this situation is not like the rest. It is not about storming the Capitol or arguing over classified documents. This is financial evidence, and they could not defend it. Not to voters, not to themselves, and not to history. Let's be clear, this is not about one stray document or a single clerical mistake. What we are seeing points to potential violations of the U.S. Constitution, specifically the Allurements Clause written to prevent exactly this kind of foreign influence. Legal scholars are already calling this the most serious indication of presidential corruption ever uncovered. And they may be right, because if a sitting president used shell companies to secretly take money from foreign states while approving policies that benefited those same governments, this stops being politics. It becomes a breach of public trust at the highest level. Inside Trump's inner circle, the reaction has not been calm or confident. It has been frantic. And that says everything. His financial entanglements with foreign interests did not begin overnight. He never divested. He never placed his holdings in a blind trust like every other modern president. Instead, he kept control of his real estate, hotels, and licensing deals. That choice was not neutral. It opened the door for foreign governments to quietly seek favor through his businesses. When you mix global power with personal profit and then remove transparency, what do you think happens? Throughout his presidency, Trump's businesses continued to operate in countries actively negotiating with his administration. Ethics watchdogs flagged it. Reports documented foreign officials booking rooms at Trump hotels or granting trademarks to his companies during sensitive diplomatic moments. But here is the critical shift. The story is no longer about appearances or access. It is about transactions, real money, real influence, and now real legal exposure. What was once dismissed as a conflict of interest now looks more like a coordinated system of foreign-backed enrichment. Ask yourself this: is this what public service should look like? A December 5th investigation exposed a major leak from a Dubai-based law firm that is now shaking Washington. The leaked documents, now called the Desert Files, outline what appears to be an alternative financial pipeline operating outside the official Trump Organization records. Over a span of 4 years, roughly $127 million moved through a web of shell companies. These transfers crossed borders and bank secrecy laws before landing in accounts tied to members of Trump's inner circle. This was not a single payment. It was a repeated structured operation designed to stay hidden and stay technically legal long enough to avoid detection. The exposure did not come from a court order or a government inquiry. It came from a whistleblower. According to sources, a compliance officer inside the firm noticed inconsistencies and escalating red flags in the transactions. That person copied thousands of internal files and sent them to multiple journalists at the same time. In a rare coordinated effort, outlets including CBS, CNN, and the Washington Post worked together to verify the documents using forensic accountants and international banking experts. Their conclusion was clear. The paper trail is legitimate, the numbers match, and the financial network was far too elaborate to be accidental. We should stop pretending this is just bad optics. This kind of arrangement is not merely unethical, it is unconstitutional. The framers wrote the Immelmans Clause because they understood the danger of foreign money influencing American power. They banned federal officials, including presidents, from accepting foreign payments without congressional approval. They knew that once secret money enters the system, national interest becomes negotiable. So we have to ask, did Donald Trump close that door or throw it wide open? Let's go deeper. A December 4th report adds critical context, not only identifying when payments were made, but who they came from. According to investigators, several payments originated from interests tied to Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Russia. And here is the turning point. These payments did not appear randomly. Their timing aligns almost exactly with key moments when the Trump administration shifted U.S. policy in ways that directly benefited those same governments. That includes weapons deals that bypass diplomatic norms, adjustments to sanctions, and changes in U.S. alliances. This does not look like coincidence. It looks like coordination. In one instance, a transfer of $35 million was routed through a Cayman Islands entity just days before Trump personally overruled the State Department to approve a controversial arms deal with Saudi Arabia. And there is more. Payments from a Russia-linked company continued through 2018 and 2019 during the same period when Trump praised Vladimir Putin, questioned NATO, and pushed for Russia's return to the G7. These are not speculative connections. They are time-stamped transfers that match headline-driving decisions. If this were a spy novel, even the editor would say the plot feels too obvious. Now let's talk about the mechanism. Forensic experts told the Washington Post that the financial trail was not just complicated, it was professionally engineered. The funds traveled through at least 7 shell companies across 5 jurisdictions, with each move carefully designed to stay under the radar of mandatory financial reporting. That is not sloppy bookkeeping. That is intentional structuring to avoid detection. And when a system is that sophisticated, you have to ask whether this was simply about money or whether it was about foreign leverage over American power. This financial architecture was not sloppy or improvised. It was built by people who clearly understood how to stay beneath the radar and how to move massive sums without triggering federal oversight. When you follow the route these transactions took, you are not just looking at money transfers, you are looking at the anatomy of concealment. The record suggests Trump had access to a private pipeline, a direct financial route from foreign governments to entities tied to him or his family, all while he was sitting in the Oval Office, making decisions that aligned with their interests. This was not blurred lines between public duty and private gain. This was 2 tracks moving in perfect sync. What makes this so dangerous is not just the money or where it came from, it is the intent. The entire setup appears deliberate and calculated to avoid exposure and consequences. That is why the leak hit Washington like a thunderclap. It cornered Republicans who had spent years defending Trump under the umbrella of doubt or denial. But here, the documents validated by independent financial experts leave no room for plausible deniability. If you defend this, you are not just standing by Trump. You are defending the idea that a U.S. president can quietly take money from foreign adversaries and no one should ask why. And let's not pretend this is the first time these concerns surfaced. Throughout Trump's presidency, we saw patterns, not allegations out of nowhere, but repeated signals that foreign business ties were shaping official behavior. The dots were always there. A decision that favored a foreign regime followed by a deal, a permit, or a payment. What is different now is that someone finally drew the lines. These documents do not suggest bad judgment. They suggest a playbook. And that brings us back to one of the most overlooked but dangerous questions. When foreign cash meets presidential power, who is the commander-in-chief really serving? In 2018, after a Washington Post journalist was murdered and dismembered by Saudi agents, the global community demanded accountability. But Donald Trump did something no other U.S. president would dare. He publicly downplayed the CIA's findings and defended Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He even said he helped protect the prince from international backlash. At the time, the question was why? Why risk America's moral standing to shield a foreign leader tied to a brutal assassination? Critics called it transactional. Today, these leaked documents suggest it may have been exactly that, transactional. That was not the only moment of strange loyalty. Remember Helsinki? Trump stood beside Vladimir Putin and publicly dismissed the conclusions of U.S. intelligence about Russian interference in the election. Instead of backing American institutions, he echoed Kremlin talking points, a moment that left even seasoned Republican foreign policy veterans stunned. But in hindsight, and with this financial trail now public, that moment looks less like poor diplomacy and more like a symptom of deeper entanglements. What if deference was not strategic but financial? When pressed on why he took these positions, Trump's answers often defied logic. He spoke vaguely about trust, personal chemistry, or not wanting to be rude. But these leaked files suggest a different motive, one that tracks with money, not words. Wire transfers linked to Russian-connected firms coincide with the same period when Trump boosted Putin's international agenda. And the case with Qatar adds another twist. Trump first supported Saudi Arabia's blockade of Qatar, then suddenly reversed course and aligned with Qatar's interests just as Qatari investments poured into a distressed Kushner-owned property. Coincidence or another example of foreign money shaping American influence? Not long after Qatari investors put money into a financially struggling Kushner property, Trump dramatically changed his stance. He shifted from supporting a Saudi-led blockade against Qatar to backing the Qatari government. Now internal records suggest that direct financial transfers occurred during that exact time frame, and that makes another episode, the Trump Tower Moscow deal, even more serious. While Trump was campaigning and publicly denying any ties to Russia, behind the scenes, the project remained active. The contradiction is no longer just political spin. It is part of a growing financial pattern. According to leaked files, money linked to Russian interests did not stop flowing even after the Trump Tower Moscow project was said to be abandoned. If anything, the financial activity increased. This now provides documentation for what many ethics experts and investigative journalists had long suspected. These were not random overlaps. They were part of an intentional web. The so-called coincidences where policy and payments seem to align were never coincidences at all. So why did 12 Republican senators finally draw the line? Because when the facts pile up like this, even political loyalty has limits. For years, Trump controversies came with built-in excuses. There was always a scapegoat and always a way to explain it away. Election disputes were just legal objections. Missing documents were blamed on staff. Even January 6th could be framed as a rally that got out of control. These narratives gave lawmakers room to defend him while keeping their reputations intact. But this time the documents left no escape hatch, no legal gray zone, no confusion, just dates, amounts, foreign ties, and the unmistakable outline of a scandal too big to deny. And for 12 senators, the cost of silence finally became higher than the price of truth. Here is the part where the excuses stop working. These leaked records do not leave room for reinterpretation. You cannot spin wire transfers. You cannot disguise shell companies. And when the timestamps of those payments align with foreign policy shifts that benefited the payers, that is not ambiguity. That is evidence. For once, there is no loyal staffer to blame and no administrative gray area to hide in. It is a paper trail with signatures, structures, and intent. And that is why this time even seasoned political defenders are running out of talking points. Sources close to the Senate revealed that several of the 12 Republican senators personally reviewed the documents before putting their names on the call for an investigation. One reportedly admitted that if the files are legitimate, and they appear to be, then everything they had said in defense of Trump collapses. Meanwhile, MAGA lawyers are already shouting about fake news or claiming the documents were planted. But the senators who signed this request are not fringe rebels. They are establishment figures, and they are not buying the conspiracy theories because they have seen the evidence up close. A national poll from December 5th shows just how deep the fracture goes. Among Republican voters, 41% say the allegations deserve serious investigation, while 52% dismiss them as a hoax. That kind of split is rare in today's polarized politics. And it marks a shift because to keep defending Trump now, you would have to believe that someone orchestrated a massive global forgery operation, crafted thousands of detailed financial records, tricked independent forensic experts across multiple news outlets, and did it with internal consistency so precise that even seasoned investigators were convinced. Does that sound plausible? That is a tall order for any senator to pretend that thousands of pages of evidence validated by experts are all fabricated, especially when doing so might cost them credibility and possibly their re-election. Then came the response from Trump's camp, and instead of transparency, it was pure hostility. There were no documents offered to disprove the claims, no line-item rebuttals, just a full-scale political attack targeting journalists, smearing the whistleblower, and publicly denouncing the senators who dared to speak up. If this were a movie, it would be the moment where silence speaks louder than the shouting. Politico reports that within hours of the statement, Trump labeled the 12 senators as traitors and even human scum, calling on Republican voters to take them out in the next primary. It was not just political pushback, it was a demand for punishment. Meanwhile, when reporters pressed Trump's legal team for any hard evidence that could challenge the financial records, they came up empty. No documents, no explanations. And to many legal observers, that silence paired with aggressive deflection looked far more like the behavior of someone cornered than someone falsely accused. That left the rest of the GOP in a brutal bind. On one hand, they need Trump's base to survive the primaries. In deeply red districts and states, Trump remains a kingmaker. Cross him and you invite MAGA-driven challengers with big money and strong media backing. But the 12 senators who broke ranks are already feeling the heat. MAGA-aligned outlets have begun painting them as traitors. Some are even being threatened with censure. So here is the question. How many more Republicans are quietly calculating their own escape plan or deciding it is already too late? On the other side of the political chessboard, these senators know that November voters are watching closely, and they are not just watching Trump. They are watching who stood beside him when real evidence surfaced. Independent voters might overlook a chaotic tweet or even a courtroom drama. But secret payments traced to regimes like Saudi Arabia or Russia hit differently. In battleground states, that is not a political nuisance. That is electoral poison. And every senator up for re-election knows it. Here is the problem. There is no safe middle lane left. It is either dismiss the documents entirely and gamble that they are fake, or acknowledge the gravity and take action. Standing with Trump now means betting your career on the hope that this mountain of record somehow collapses. But if it does not, you are on record defending possible foreign bribery. And in the general election, that is not a policy disagreement. That is a character collapse. Try explaining that to suburban voters in Pennsylvania or independents in Arizona. Then there is the other route to break ranks and call for an investigation. But that comes with its own storm. It means inviting the fury of Trump, his loyalists, and the MAGA media machine, which thrives on purging dissent. You might survive the general election, but only if you survive the primary, and that is a big if. Still, the 12 senators who have already spoken up seem to have done the math. To them, the risk of staying silent and possibly defending the indefensible outweighed the cost of defiance. And that shift says everything. For 12 Republican senators to break ranks after years of defending Trump through impeachment, criminal probes, and political scandals speaks volumes. These are not rebels. They are party loyalists. If they are publicly calling for an investigation, imagine how many others are doing the math in private. And while the GOP base keeps marching forward, the silence from top Republican leadership is striking. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has yet to defend Trump or even acknowledge the documents. In Washington, silence is never neutral. It is calculated. Behind the scenes, GOP strategists are in crisis mode. They are not just planning campaigns. They are wargaming an entirely new political landscape, one where Trump remains the most influential figure in the party, but also stands accused of accepting illicit foreign money. What does that mean for 2026? How do you run candidates who are either linked to or silent about these allegations? Can you stand by Trump without looking complicit while Republican operatives spin scenarios? The MAGA base is doubling down. Their loyalty is not weakening, it is solidifying, but that loyalty is drifting into dangerous territory. Some voices on the right are now dismissing the leaks as part of a shadowy global plot. Others are shifting the narrative, suggesting that even if Trump took money, it does not count as illegal. That argument says more than they realize. The divide is growing wider between Republican voters who demand ideological purity and Republican senators who are now staring at a legal, ethical, and electoral abyss. And into that divide stepped Mitt Romney. No longer running for office, Romney called the documents devastating and issued a blunt challenge to his colleagues. Choose the Constitution or choose complicity. Mitt Romney's public statement did not just make headlines, it shifted the tone inside the GOP. By calling the evidence devastating, Romney gave institutional cover to Republicans who might have been on the fence. He is not seeking re-election, he is not looking for airtime. So when he says this crosses a line, that carries weight. Meanwhile, constitutional scholars are not softening their language. Several are warning that the conduct described in these documents could amount to the gravest criminal actions ever tied to a sitting president, and that includes Watergate. Harvard's Lawrence Tribe did not hold back. On national television, he reminded Americans that the founders wrote the Emoluments Clause for a reason, to stop secret foreign money from infecting the presidency. Tribe was blunt. If these records hold up, they describe impeachable conduct in violations of federal law. That is not political commentary. That is constitutional doctrine. And the magnitude is staggering. A legal scholar of tribe stature is saying the exact abuse the Constitution was written to prevent may have occurred not once but repeatedly over years. Even legal voices who normally caution against rushing to judgment are raising alarms. One commentator, often critical of partisan overreach, said plainly that, if verified, this level of deception would be indefensible in any serious legal or ethical forum. He pointed to the financial architecture, layers of entities stacked across borders, each designed to conceal the final destination of funds that is not administrative error. That is intentional financial design. And once you strip away the legal jargon, the question becomes painfully clear. Who was this system built to protect and why? Let's be clear, this is not just another headline-grabbing controversy. This leak has the potential to shift the balance of American politics, fracture the Republican Party, and weaken America's global credibility. The fact that 12 Republican senators have already broken ranks is not symbolic. It sets a precedent. It creates momentum inside Congress that becomes harder to contain with each passing day. Once institutional legitimacy starts to tilt, it does not reverse easily. It cascades. That is why the pressure is rising. Senate committees that have tiptoed around Trump-related probes are now facing renewed demands to act. And at the Justice Department, where multiple investigations are already in motion, this new financial trail gives prosecutors a roadmap they did not have before. We are not watching a full political collapse, but the cracks are widening. Trump's grip over the GOP is no longer absolute. The idea that he could walk through any scandal untouched is fading. Now comes the hard question for the rest of the Senate. If you are not calling for an investigation, why not? What does it mean to defend a former president when the evidence suggests that secret money flowed from foreign states into his orbit while those same states benefited from U.S. policy? That is not just a political inconvenience. That is a national security red flag. Every foreign policy decision made during Trump's presidency is now open to scrutiny because when money enters through the back door, trust exits through the front. Now step back and consider the foreign policy fallout. If a sitting U.S. president was quietly receiving money from foreign governments, then every international decision made under his watch must be reevaluated. Arms deals, backroom diplomacy, covert intelligence exchanges, all of it is now tainted by the possibility of pay-to-play politics. For allies, this changes the conversation. What once looked like strategic unpredictability now looks more like purchased influence. And for America's reputation abroad, that is not just embarrassing, it is destabilizing. Nations like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Russia now find themselves under an intense spotlight, not just as global actors, but as possible buyers in a hidden market for presidential power. How do American diplomats sit across the table from leaders who may have signed checks to a U.S. president? And what does that mean for the legitimacy of every treaty, sanction, relief package, or military agreement signed during Trump's term? The questions now stretch far beyond campaign finance or criminal liability. They reach into the fabric of trust between nations. Domestically, the political cost is no less severe. Republicans heading into 2026 must now choose between two high-risk paths. They can stand behind a man tied to documented foreign payments, or they can risk a civil war inside their party by breaking away. There is no messaging strategy that makes foreign money look patriotic. Swing voters, especially in purple states, will not accept it. So here is where we stand. 12 Republican senators have drawn a line. They are not only breaking with Trump, they are signaling that for them, the Constitution still outweighs the cult of personality. The question is, who comes next? These are not random coincidences. The flow of money matches up transaction by transaction with real-world policy wins for the governments involved. Saudi Arabia received weapons deals. Russia received softened rhetoric on NATO. The United Arab Emirates gained diplomatic leverage, and beneath it all was a network of shell companies designed to bury the money trail. That is not simply secretive. That is strategic. Forensic analysts reviewed the transfers, confirmed their legitimacy, and made one thing clear. This was not political sloppiness. It was deliberate concealment. And if that is true, then we are not talking about a president with poor judgment. We are talking about a presidency compromised by foreign cash. Let's not sugarcoat this. If the evidence holds, and so far it is holding, it means foreign governments bought access at the highest level of American power. That is not a metaphor. That is a transaction. And if Donald Trump walks away from this politically untouched, what message does that send? It suggests a president can break the most sacred constitutional boundaries and still keep the full support of his party. At that point, we are not just debating corruption. We are redefining accountability or eliminating it entirely. This is no longer about Trump alone. This is about whether our system, the Constitution, the checks and balances, and the institutions can respond when tested at the very top. When the alleged corruption is this vast and the documentation this detailed, does the law still apply? That is the real test here. It is not about one man. It is about the system's ability to hold even the most powerful accountable. And make no mistake, this trail of money, already verified in public, may only be the beginning. Investigators are digging deeper, and history is watching closely. Right now, the stakes are enormous. The evidence is damning, and the silence or action from Republican lawmakers may help determine not just the future of a political party, but the credibility of American democracy itself. Because if this level of documented and deliberate foreign entanglement is not enough to provoke consequences, then what is? This is the moment not just for Trump, but for every elected official deciding whether truth and law still matter more than party and